Folks, hello and welcome to Talking Crit with your three Fargin Bastiges. There we go.
Mhm.
I am Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR. With me, stage whatever, is Bad Mike, sometimes known as Lucifer, and
Mhm.
holding us up from below is none other than the one, the only Jim Kitchen.
Okay.
Bum bum bum. So here
And,
we
he,
go.
and yeah, Jim, we're gonna talk to Jim tonight because Jim was the auctioneer at Gary Con. They raised a ridiculous amount of money for charity, which is great. And he's gonna let us in on stuff. And I think I'm not sure. Did you marry Satine and Jameson at this? Oh wait, that was 2 years ago. I'm sorry, I got it mixed up there.
Only
No,
two?
did you divorce them? Did you divorce them this time? I can't remember.
I feel like I feel like we got to talk about I don't know. Did they ever have, like, when you know how celebrities date and then they squish their names together? Were they ever like
Satine
Thomason or something? So there is an interesting, like I got a lot of stuff from Gary Kondo to unpack. But But one of the things that we should immediately speak with, because yes, it was at Gary Con that Satine and Jameson professed their love and came
Right.
together. They were forged in hell by the souls of the damned. I'm sorry, they came together in a union of love and passion and shared it with everybody for $9.99 on live stream if you wanted the pay per view. But they got married at Gary Con a few years ago, and as we have famously mocked over the last year or so, then things took a turn for the worse once Satine was outed as being Satine, and
Oh,
and Jameson was outed for Jameson-like things. But interestingly enough, somebody actually pointed out this week that Jameson hath changed his name.
Oh
and,
dear.
and he is now Lightstone. I'm not sure why. Does this mean he's a lodestone? Does this mean
he's a spiritual leader.
I'm glad that in this 21st century we have no shortage of spiritual leaders. Now, it did actually cause me pause to look and see what Satine is up to, and she is still continuing her vortrek, her spirit journey, her, I don't know, what other terrible cliches can we throw in here? She's
God.
on her spirit journey. She's
Right.
finding
It's her vision
animal.
quest. Her vision quest.
Her vision quest. Yes,
There we
I
go.
like that.
Definitely a
Except
vision.
it doesn't have the really hot Journey song or the really slow Madonna ballad that
No,
Vision Quest, the
no.
movie, had. No, this is just Satine going to like places like Kuala Lumpur and making a post where she talks about how she always overdresses for the occasion. She doesn't have to worry about slumming it. I mean, there's just Satine's Instagram. I rarely say this, but everything that's free comes with a price, and Satine's Instagram comes with a price of both indigestion and 1d6 sanity loss with every post that you read. But it is there in case you were bored and you need to see what nitwittery she's up to. So, I heard that last week, but yes, Gary Con was last week, and we have a lot to unpack about Gary Con. So,
And by the way, Luke, forgive us for focusing. We're fascinated by the Satine and Jameson wedding. And probably
well, I don't
we
even
always will
blame you,
be.
Luke.
We always
Luke,
will be.
Luke got caught up in their aura, the magnificence that is their unholy bond, and got sort of pulled into all of
We're
this.
moving on into the better things. We're going to move to better things here.
Yes. So here are some Gary Con observations, right? So I've been going for, I believe, 9 years now, and I like Gary Con. I would say a few things. Number one is that this was not the super spreader event of last year. I don't know of anybody that got horribly ill, and I don't know that people are dropping like flies. I think there was a bit of an effort to sort of try to make things a little bit better. That was my impression. I could be wrong. But for the most part, I thought that Gary Con this year was the bits and bobs that I interacted with were much better than last year. There was a vast improvement. One of the things that I thought was really well handled was that swag was swag was handled with people who were pleasant and excited to greet you and said all the right things and didn't yell at you, and you didn't feel like you were being herded into a cattle pen. There was a lot of smart thinking that went into how they handled swag. It was pretty efficient. The lines were kept at a minimum, and I thought we were really off to a good start. So particularly badge pickup and so on. There was a really big effort to make all of that experience much, much better than previous years. And so then let me talk about the gaming, right? So Gary Con starts on Thursday morning, like a lot of 4-day shows. It games hard Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. One of the things that Gary Con sort of had to deal with from early on was they got a shout out on The Big Bang Theory, and when that happened, it went from being a reasonably sized little show to something much larger, and it still is. I would certainly say that, like the last few years, it strains at the boundaries of what the Grand Geneva can hold. The Grand Geneva being the Marcus-owned resort in Lake Geneva that used to be the Playboy Resort, which is always good for a laugh. But gaming was I scored a couple of victories with gaming this year. So I had breakfast with Errol Otis one day while I was there, and breakfast with Errol is now a thing. Like once a year, I get to have breakfast with Errol at Gary Con, and it's always interesting because the subject, there's never anything that sort of comes up. Although we don't really talk about TS. I never ask about TSR in the old days, and I never ask about all the stuff that fanboy Jim wants to ask. And we end up having a very healthy conversation. And two things. Errol loves to fly as much as I do, which is not at all.
Yeah.
And Errol had never actually heard of anti-anxiety medicine to perhaps make flying better. And so Errol and I had a very good conversation about that, where he took notes and is like, so you may see Errol be willing to travel a little bit more now that I've given him a hint, Xanax, that will help him get back on a plane. But interestingly, Errol is not a convention guy. If Errol goes to one convention a year, he's pretty much happy to do that. He's not one of the folks that needs to go here, there, and so on and so forth. But gaming was well run. I played in several games, particularly Thursday. I had a great experience. I played in Jim Wampler's MCC game on Thursday morning, smart group of people. I played in an unbelievably interesting game of DCC with what was supposed to be Harley Stroh and Doug Kovacs. Harley couldn't make the convention due to circumstances, but you essentially play as two separate parties, but everybody is the same character. Like everybody has a counterpart. Like I was a courtesan, and there was a woman down at the other end of the table that was playing the courtesan, and the last hour we had to work as a pair of, two brains driving one body, which was interesting. It was a lot of fun, very, very silly. But gaming is why you go to Gary Con, and there's a ton of gaming. So let me talk to that. Sort of segues into the next thing, which is sweet bejesus, Shadow Frickin' Dark.
Oh, nice.
I cannot tell you. So let me back up. A year ago, going into Gary Con was when I was first hearing about Shadow Dark from people, including Steve Winter. And Steve Winter was like, I'm going to use Shadow Dark to run games going forward because I love it and I think it's great. And when somebody like Steve Winter tells you that, you're like, well, that's interesting. So it was a year ago at Gary Con that I got my copy of Shadow Dark. I got the basic rulebook. And what's fascinating is the downstairs area of the Grand Geneva, where there's 3 ballrooms. You can make it one massive ballroom, but 3 separate rooms. Normally, this is taken over by D&D and Pathfinder. Pathfinder has had a giant presence. It was Shadow Dark, Shadow Dark, Shadow Dark. And by the way, there were lots of banners pointing to where the Shadow Dark lair was all over the place. And what space wasn't being used for Shadow Dark was being used for DCC. Now, DCC is a constant at Gary Con. It's one of the shows that DCC got started at very early, but there was nary anything Pathfinder that I can even remember. Now, one of the things I need to do is I actually need to dive into the Gary Con events file that I had, the XL, and take a look at it. I haven't done that yet. But Sweet Christmas, Shadow Dark, Shadow Dark, Shadow Dark, Shadow Dark, Shadow Dark, and more Shadow Dark on top of Shadow Dark with some Shadow Dark in from this side. And by the way, a la mode Shadow Dark on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't hurt that Arcane Library actually had a booth in the vendor hall area. Kelsey was a very, very, very visible presence at the show, and was certainly, she had autograph signings after autograph signings. She had a panel. There is a lot of activity about Shadow Dark, and I had a conversation with a store owner last night, and I said, if you don't have it yet, you need to get it, because it's got all the momentum and it has all of the buzz, and that's when you see it, right? Like, one of the things that used to be the hallmark of Gen Con or Origins or whatnot, maybe not Origins so much, but whatever the big thing was at Gen Con, it trickled down to the retail stores. It took a while. But we're on the cusp of a tidal wave of Shadow Dark. I got a couple of supplements, third party books for Shadow Dark, and was very interested to spend some time last night reading them. I think what we're seeing is the initial stampede, the way we did with the OGL, which is a lot of well-intentioned people are going to be writing things for Shadow Dark. But be careful where you spend your money. There's some stuff there that I think will be, and there's some stuff that I think is very, very good. The guys, Greyhawk Jesus and Alan Grohe and Taco John steered me towards a couple of what they thought were better Shadow Dark supplements, independent third-party books, and I bought those. I was very happy with those. I should give a big shout out to Fugly, because there was a coordinated effort to wear our Edwin versus the Frost Giant shirts on Thursday night, and that landed with not only a big hit with the people who saw them, and people were asking where we could get them. So Fugly, we need to make sure that link's active so I can share it and we can get some more shirt revenue for you. But Bushra, who was in fact another one of Edwin's countless victims, almost laughed herself hoarse looking at the shirts and getting a great chuckle out of seeing Edwin.
She knew the joke, right? She got
the joke. Trust me, anybody's gamed with Edwin.
Yeah.
You get the joke. So we had a really good. It was a good con. It was a very solid con. And Shadow Dark. What's very interesting to hear. There's people that carp about Shadow Dark, right? There's people that are like, I don't like this about Kelsey, or I think she stole this from that. And it's like, whatever, right? Jealousy takes many forms. And before tonight, one of the things that I did is I actually went back and I had watched a few of Kelsey's videos from her YouTube channel for Arcane Library. And this is what I would say, right? There's no shortage of carping, because people want to have the same kind of success that Kelsey has had. And I understand that. We all want people. Fugly, you got to put the shirt back up, buddy. I'm just telling you. So we know those people in the industry that have had a modicum level of success, but carping about someone else tells me far more about how insecure you are than Kelsey's chops as a game designer. Because Let's be honest, Kelsey swept every single award you could win in the RPG industry, including the Three Castles Award, which was the first one she won at North Texas in June.
So it was.
And really and truly, like, all the people are like, well, I'm just waiting for her to stumble. I'm just waiting for her to fail, eh? Fucking you. I'm sorry, but really and truly, I just don't have time for this bullshit, right? Mm. This is petty interoffice jealousy. When one department hits a home run, everybody in the fucking company ought to figure it out and just say, this is great for the hobby. And it is. It really, really is. I would liken the buzz around Shadow Dark to being very similar pagan publishing-esque in 1995, 96, where they sort of, if you knew about them, you knew about them, But when they landed Delta Green and blew up the world, and suddenly Chaosium's the licensed property was doing better than Chaosium's property, holy crap! And that's where we are with Shadow Dark. Shadow Dark is ubiquitous, and it's only going to get bigger. And I think if you haven't played it, I mean, I would really encourage you to get on board with the Kickstarter. If you want to wait for fulfillment later this year. But frankly, go ahead and buy a rule book now, dive in, start looking at it, and then back the Kickstarter so you're not left out, right? Let's see, what other stuff before I get to Saturday? So interestingly, the celebrities were there. And what I would say about that is I've spent the last couple of days having conversations with people who are like, well, did you see Joe at the show? Yes. Did you see Vince Vaughn at the show? Yes. Did you see Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine? Yes. Did you see The Big Show? Yes. And what I would really just say about that is these guys were not there to be celebrities. These guys were there to play games, and they wanted to play a variety of games in a style that I think really makes sense to me. So I have a very good friend in Edmonton, Alberta. There's a local group of guys. They play games together. And every year they get together for what they call Games in Guinness. And they start playing games from Friday afternoon, and they go balls to the wall until Sunday night. And they play a variety of games. There's only one game that they guaranteed are going to play every year, and that's Formula D. And they have a ruthless Formula D game. But they play a variety of things. One year they did Boot Hill. And it's interesting because remember that these celebrities that come to GaryCon, this is Joe's D&D gaming group in Lake Geneva. Mm-hmm. And they want to try different things. So they play D&D, but they also play Boot Hill. Mike Merrill's ran a game for him, but I'm not sure, and I'll come back to Mike here in a second. But those guys are there to play. They're not there to be celebrities, right? And the problem is they are celebrities who just want to play games. And so they sort of are like a little bit of heads down, like, I'm glad that you want my autograph, but I'm here to roll dice. Mm-hmm. And so I had a couple of conversations, but I would really just throw out that when we've talked about a second tier at GaryCon or a celebrity tier at GaryCon, I really didn't get that sense of that. Now, their events were not events that anybody could get into, right? They were there playing games they wanted to play, but they wanted to be at GaryCon and they wanted to be in Lake Geneva. And truthfully, my conversations with 2 or 3 of them were very indicative of they were there for the right reasons. They were there to honor Gary. They were there to contribute to the charity auction. I'll come back to that. They were there as attendees, not celebrity attendees. And in fact, I think the trappings of being a celebrity are a little hard on them because they can't just walk around without, hey, I have this idea, or hey, I want to pitch you this, or Jesus Christ, right? Like poor Tom Morello at one point, like this is, I think, the 40th anniversary of the Rage Against the Machine album. And that was a dude who was like wearing his hat low and his collar high and just trying to get from A to B without being mauled. Yeah. And I respect that, right? I really do. I understand that. So let me talk about Mike real quick. And I know we're going to talk about Mike later, but Mike was doing something really interesting. Mike has a new RPG that he's working on. He has some new rules that he threw at us. So I played in Mike's game on Friday morning, and I really, really want to say there's some clever ideas there. There's some clever mechanics, and they are not 5e mechanics, right? They are a step away from 5e and a step away. There were 2 very, very clever mechanics. I'm going to try to get Mike on this show and let Mike talk to whatever he wants to talk to about it. It's not my job to spoil Mike's game, but I found his ideas. It was sort of like a 5e OGL base, but he had some very interesting ideas about random encounters and how that works. And he had some very interesting ideas about, he has some very clever mechanics with dealing with party successes and that sort of all. So Hold on a second. Let me talk about the charity auction. So a couple of years ago, the Gary Con charity auction started hitting numbers that are pretty extraordinary. So 8 years ago, Frank Mincer pretty much stepped back from being the auctioneer at Gary Con. And I sort of took over the lead role of auctioneer. And we obviously had a couple of years with COVID that messed everything up for everybody. But we came back in a big way. And so we raised a lot of money for Wounded Warrior a couple of years ago. And then Luke picked as the charity partner, Children's Hospital of Wisconsin, Children's Wisconsin. And it's very different when the 3-hour charity auction at a convention in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, with a couple thousand attendees, is beating the charity auction at Gen Con with a hell of a lot more attendees. And so we passed that. We passed that a couple of years ago, and really sort of left my head scratched. I'm like, where are we going with this? And so I always sort of have as an internal goal that I'd like to see a number that's anywhere from 10 to 15% more than the previous year. But last year we hit over $50,000. Now, let me say something real quick. There are pieces of the Gary Con auction that were not transparent a few years ago, and Luke and I had a very good conversation about this, and Luke was very, very decent about this. We try to keep a tabulated sheet of what everything goes for. The only thing that gets backed out of the amount of money that's raised at the charity auction at Gary Con is credit card fees. That gets taken out of that total because a lot of people put it all in their plastic. And the other is the housing costs for the rooms for the families that come. And so let me talk to that. So every year with Children's Hospital, they have 2 families that come to the show, and we try to get people from the family to talk before we have the auction. And so I had been in touch with the families before the show, and the way this sort of played out, we had a dad, the father of one of the families. If you were at the show, you might remember me sort of running around with a 6-year-old boy, a really hyperactive 6-year-old boy who was just being exactly what a 6-year-old boy should be. And his name is Holden. And Holden's dad is the one who spoke first. He talked about how, here we are, we're new parents. We have a little boy, a couple years old, and he starts having breathing problems at home. They don't know what's going on. Not sure what's going on. But it's serious enough that they go ahead and call for an ambulance. The ambulance driver says, hey, which way do you want to go? Do you want to go to X hospital, which my impression was slightly closer, or do you want to go to Children's Hospital, Children's Wisconsin? And the dad said, let's go to Children's. And he said essentially it was a pretty smart call I made, because 2 minutes later his son coded out in the ambulance, flatline. No pulse. And when you have a father say this, there's just a gasp. As a parent, you just all of a sudden you're riven with just this horrible feeling. And he talked about how he had unknowingly made the best possible decision he could, because by the time they got to Children's, the crash cart was waiting and it was all hands on deck. And that wonderfully silly little 6-year-old boy that was running around with me telling people to bid hard and bid often, he could have been stone cold dead before the end of that. So then the other family, we had a 13-year-old named Oliver who spoke. And Oliver was in a wheelchair and he could not hold the microphone, so I held it for him. And Oliver talked about how about 6 months prior, he had come down with an illness that I was unaware of that had left him paralyzed from the neck down. In his first month at Children's Hospital, he was on a ventilator, struggling. The next 2 months, he was off the ventilator. They were able to do a trach tube, and he had to spend 2 months learning how to breathe again. And Oliver after he spoke, at one point he got really choked up and he said, "I'm sorry, this is really hard. I haven't told my story before." Um, you know, you have these moments where you just have to pause and you have to wipe the tears away, and it was pretty much the whole room. And Oliver then, I told him, he said, "How am I doing?" I said, "You're doing fine. You're doing fine, Oliver." And at the end, Oliver pointed out that the money we were going to raise was not money for Oliver or Holden. It was for the kids that didn't even know that they were going to need to be at Children's Hospital.
Uh-huh.
And that's a pretty. I had asked the parents, don't let other people tell you what to say. Say what you want to say. And Oliver had practiced. It's been a week practicing what he was going to say after getting an email from me. And I told Oliver, I said, "You nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. Home run." But we are a victim of our own success at the GaryCon auction because we had over 220 items to auction in the first in 3 hours, which is an extraordinary amount of stuff.
You guys were on a quick pace. Yeah, that's a lot.
I think we got 80 items out of the way in the first hour, just trying to get a buffer. But that's probably one of the fastest auctions I've ever done. In fact, I was going so fast that Bill Meinhardt was having trouble keeping. Bill's my Vanna White at all these auctions. Bill could not keep up with how fast we were going. There was no time for jokes, although I did get a couple of good ones in. But it's also very clear that people save money all year long, treat this like a trip to Disney World, and throw monstrous amounts of money at a good cause. And so where I was hoping we might hit 55, 60, we hit over $85,000.
That's extraordinary. Yeah.
We had one of the new D&D pinball machines, MSRP of $7,000 because it was autographed by Joe and Vince and some other folks. It went for $8,600. And so lunch with Luke and Bushra, we were at $4,000 and they weren't stopping. And one of the bidders looked at the other and said, "Let's just make it $8,000, $4,000 from you and $4,000 from me." Okay, right? That's out of my hands as an auctioneer to try to get people to do. But it was an afternoon punctuated with this kind of stuff. The fellow Dave from Children's Hospital, we spoke on Sunday night and he said, "We don't even have words, right? You just can't imagine." I've said time and time again that our community is extraordinarily generous. We have a lot of people that were in circumstances, we have a lot of people in the role-playing game industry who, I know you're stunned to hear physical fitness isn't their primary concern. But we are a community filled with people who might have been in and out of the hospital when they were kids or what. And really and truly, people came loaded for bear. People absolutely didn't pull any punches. We had an aggregate, $1 average aggregate that was simply extraordinary. And people happy to do this. I always say I'm sort of the front man for the effort. I'm trying to coordinate it. But
I like to add something real quick, and
yeah, go ahead.
And I don't want this to get too personal or anything, but so the money for this, all the money goes to the charity except for, like you said, expenses. And Jim knows this was not always the case. And I'm going to give you some kudos here, Jim. Jim and some other people talked to the Gygaxes a few years ago about changing how the auction worked, because at that time, a percentage of the auction went to charity. And honestly, I don't know what the percentage was. I don't know. I heard 3 or 4 different stories I didn't know. That is to your credit that you and some other people said, if you want this to be legit, this needs to be 100% charity auction.
I think the other thing is that, and let me back up because I want to tread very carefully here. There was somebody.
Yeah, I don't want to.
No, that's okay. Somebody used to be associated with GaryCon who's no longer associated with GaryCon. There were questions about how some things had gone. There were questions about items that were donated for auction that never made it into the auction. There were some things like that. Now, having said that, I could not get through everything that was donated. And in fact, we had people still trying to donate things 5 minutes before the auction started. Like,
Oh,
sweet
geez.
Jesus, you're killing me. And so we put some items aside for next year's auction simply because we were out of time. We could not do it. And that's, that's different between items that got donated and that were never seen again. There's a big difference.
Absolutely, yeah. It's
And Luke,
I guess the transparency is what I'm talking about.
Yes,
Transparency now is very much there. There's a lot of transparency, and I think it's worked to the auction. I'm going to tell you, Jim, personally, I knew people that wouldn't bid in the auction because of transparency. And as you said, it has to do with people that are no longer associated with it. But there was people that didn't. They're like, I don't. Why am I going to give them money? I don't know where the money's going. I have no clue.
Well, and that's just part of it too. There was any effort to record the auction or record what things sold for was this person poo-pooed. That's as far from transparency as you could ask. Once I really sort of spoke to Luke about it, Luke was very receptive. Luke was very quick to make the right changes. We had an auditor. We had somebody from the Gary Con volunteer staff who kept track, whose job is to keep track of what things sell for. Mm-hmm. But that first year after we made some changes, we had somebody else who sat in the audience and kept their own record to keep us honest.
Very good.
And I like that. I'm a big fan of that because you should be able to bid at a charity auction and know that your
transparency is so important. It really is. It's everything. It's if you don't have transparency, you can't expect people to, like you said, just open up their piggy banks.
That's right. And I would really say this. It doesn't have to be any of the auctions. I mean, all the auctions I'm associated with are very. I don't intend to go into something that's murky and dark and questionable. I simply won't do it. You should go to charity auctions and you should approach them as trust but verify, and that's just the way that people should do business. I think it's ludicrous in this day and age to. Well, we can't really show you everything. Oh, bullshit. What are you up to? I just simply
just put up front with the percentages. It's so easy to do. And we do that in North Texas. And we're very upfront that the money goes to North Texas because we're a small con. That's one of our main revenues.
If you like the guests at North Texas, how does that happen? The charity auction on Saturday afternoon. I'm sorry, the auction on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
Where the proceeds go to fund next year's show and the attendees
the money from last year's midnight auction, which does pretty well, a couple of $1,000 every year, a few thousand, was used to buy the sound system we will be using this year,
right?
Which is something we have needed for a long time. This is our 17th year, and I am tired, Jim. I don't know about you. I'm tired of having to shout out to the audience. We're going to have an actual headset sound system this year, but that was paid for through the auction. And when we're very upfront about this. Your money at the midnight auction last year paid for our sound system. Thank you very much, everybody, for bidding on garbage.
And every auction is different. Every charity auction is different. But as long as you're clear with people, people are smart. They'll decide if they want to support you or not. And there isn't an auction I work that doesn't have a pile of people who want to help. Although probably my favorite joke that I landed was when there was one bidder who was, we'll say, particularly eager to win the lunch with Luke and Bushra.
Oh, boy.
I said, you can wine them, you can dine them, you could make it a throuple. I don't want to know. And I think Bushra was not aware of the word throuple because I thought I saw a little bit of an exchange between her and Luke. But we'll see if I still have a job.
Wow.
Anyway, so we
might not have a job next year. Do you have a job next year? Are you sure you have a job next year?
I don't know. So very lucky. The volunteers, the Gary Con staff volunteers are amazing people. They work very, very hard to make it go as well as it does. I can't tell you the volume. I felt this giant mountain of stuff behind me just cresting and crashing into me all night long. but we got through it, or all afternoon long. But we got through it, and I didn't have a voice for a couple of days afterwards.
Well, Jim, give us a couple of interesting. What were the interesting items? Give me a couple of interesting, unusual.
Well, if you're a collector, when Lynn Lakofka died, he left boxes of papers, and so some Lynn Lakofka original documents went for $2,300, $2,400, somewhere in there. We had original art. Now, one of the most interesting things, Chris, the president of Titmouse, who the president and CEO, he's the fellow who had the sandal of Gygax over this past year and has done extraordinary things. He took it everywhere. That man traveled all around the world and made sure that thing was right next to him the entire time. And so he had an auction a few years ago of art, Dungeons and Dragons inspired art done by various animators. And strangely enough, after the show was over and people had bid and won and paid, they had a dozen pieces of art that nobody ever bothered to pick up. And lo and behold, he brought them all and donated them to the charity auction.
Ooh,
and so,
nice.
450s, there were a couple that were 750. Everything sold. Every one of those sold. Some of them got into knife fights in a phone booth. That was an extraordinarily generous. We had a complete set of endless. Oh my God! We had a complete set of endless quest books, endless quest books, including the impossibly rare ones, the last ones that were so hard to find. It was a complete set in a box. The guy donated, and I think on the Gary Con Facebook page, he's like, I hope they'll get like $50 or something. $2,000 later.
Yeah, that's to get them all at once is people buy them in pieces because you can't. Nobody sells a collection of those in complex. That's crazy. That's
crazy. And he was just like, oh,
I should have put it on eBay.
Oh my God. So all of this is good fun. Rose Estes, a good moment, a good laugh I had. Our friend, the wily Canadian Jeff Emery, won a stack of books where on the paper, what it said was the books were all signed by the original artist, the artists who had done the covers for them. So like Clyde Caldwell and so on. Mm-hmm. And they were also signed by Rose Estes. Well, they were not signed by Rose Estes. They were just signed by the artist who had done the cover. And Jeff is like, and I'm like, yeah, okay. Let me go catch up with Rose and I'll fix your problem. Mm-hmm. So I caught up with Rose and she was great. And she signs all the books. And I take them back to Jeff. And Jeff goes through them and then he picks up two and he's like, hey, Rose didn't sign these. And I'm like, oh, shit. So I go back and Rose is like, Jim, I'm not signing books that Gary wrote.
Oh.
I'm like, that's a fair point, Rose. You got me on that one. So
show Jeff here, take it and leave it.
I did. I took it back to Jeff and I was like, Rose isn't forging Gary's name, buddy.
Get out of here, Jeff. I'm tired of this shit.
But overall, Gary Con was amazing. It was a great show. I had a phenomenal DCC game with Brendan LaSalle on Sunday morning. I got to see all the people I've come to know over the last 10, 15 years, 15 years, and got to do some good work for charity. So all in all, the next one's North Texas, and I'm looking forward to North Texas. I'm starting to think about shenanigans for the midnight auction and so on. But I know no skits. Although I got a lot of material to ignore.
Gary and I have done putting some heads together. We've got some amazing events for the midnight auction.
I'm looking forward to Call of Cthulhu meets Buc-ee's. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Buc-ee's?
Yes. Ooh. Call of Cthulhu meets Buc-ee's, right?
You could do that.
You could do that. I've had a lot of ideas percolating since this week.
Now,
I'll tell you what, the drive back from Lake Geneva is always one where I'm like, the tanks are charged up and you're like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that. It's interesting. It's kind of fun. So,
well, great. That's great. I'm glad you had a good. I'm sorry I missed it this year. Yeah. I try to get back next year. It's one of those cons I really can't go to every year. Cost and Now I heard people weren't as sick as that was last year. It wasn't the disease vector that it was last year, but I have to be careful. I did talk to one person that got sick, and that's Jeff Grubb. Jeff Grubb is sick now. I talked to him today, and he got really sick. So other than that, though, I haven't heard the usual, murderer's row of people who are down and out for weeks at a time after GaryCon. So that's good. That they still need to start. They need to have. I heard they did not have sanitizer stations. They still need to have sanitizer stations.
Yeah, I didn't see that, and I needed to. I should have said something about that. One of the things that I will say this: the judges, like your GMs. Oh, I left out two things. So number one is the GMs for GaryCon. All the volunteer GMs get a briefing sheet of stuff that they are empowered to do. And one of the things that it says very clearly, because I've seen the sheet, I've read it, is that if they come to a table and the table is filthy, the table is disgusting, whatever, if they just want it done, they're to ask somebody on the Grand Geneva staff who will come and change the tablecloths out and give you brand new tablecloths.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, but the GMs are so freaking lazy that none of them actually do it. And so there were tablecloths that had been put down on Wednesday afternoon that hadn't been changed since ever. And so I talked about this with the GaryCon staffer on Sunday, and he was like, all they have to do is let us know. But
that's gross. That's gross.
You can lead the GM to a table, but you can't make them think.
No.
So, and then I forgot that on Friday evening, I was trying to rest my voice, but on Friday evening, somebody double booked Ed Greenwood. And I apologize if there's anybody watching this game. I got drafted to finish Ed Greenwood's game on Friday.
It had probably already gone way downhill, and you just were there to.
Which is mercifully, it was not a pants optional game, so I was kind of happy about that. But I got drafted to finish Ed's game on Friday night, and Ed sort of didn't give me any idea of what was going on, and it was a big group, and they didn't seem to be doing a whole lot, and so we just fought. I randomly picked a monster out of the bin, and they ended up fighting a green dragon. I apologize if you were in that game. If you felt like you got ripped off from the last half hour, 40 minutes of Ed Greenwood time, I'm terribly sorry. But before I took over, I forced Ed to sign anybody's sheets that wanted an autograph. So I at least gave you that, you guys. But yes, Ed was double booked, and he did manage to get a couple of Ed Greenwood isms in before he left. When I said, well, okay, is this a clothing optional game? And he goes, everybody's naked under their pants. And I was like, keep moving, old man. Just keep moving. Just go. Please, God, just go. So Ed got to Ed. Birds got to fly. But there you go. There's my GaryCon report. You can make of that what you will.
Well, thank you. That's great, Jim. I'm glad. Like I said, the charity auction there. The charity is such a good charity, and you guys do great work there. And so that's great. We love to hear that.
And the people at Children's Wisconsin, they couldn't be nicer. And their rep who was there, his jaw was on the floor. We went from 50, 55, somewhere in there, to $85,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's exhausting. Just exhausting. So there you go.
Well, we also tonight want to talk a couple things, and somebody just reminded me of this. And I want to talk Larry Elmore, and I'm sure you guys are going to have opinions on this. But we're also going to talk Mike Merles. Do you want to do Elmore first or Merles?
Let's talk about. Let's save Mike.
We're gonna do Elmore. We haven't really done a really good This Week in Gaming Stupid lately, but I think we have a contender. We have an absolute contender. Eric, tell the story. Why don't you tell the story?
Well, I can tell a bit of the story.
Do you have the artwork you can show?
Oh, God. Oh,
you
even as
tell the
busy
story
as I
then.
was, I
gotta
saw this, and this was amazing.
Okay, so it turns out that
Yeah, I have it. I gotta
turns out
find it.
that so just a little bit of background. We had Larry Elmore for the first time in North Texas. He suggested that Margaret Weiss and Trace Hickman come. They're buddies. They're amigos. They're friends. Larry does the cover of all their books. I mean, they are just the close knit. And so, because of Larry, we got Margaret Weiss and Trace Pittman come to our little speck of a convention. When they said that they don't even do conventions less than 3,000 people, and we got them to come. And because they are that close, they're that tight. They're tight. So Larry does the cover. If you notice, even when they're not doing TSR books, Larry does the cover of everything that Margaret and Tracy does. Right. So they wrote a new Dragonlance book. Surprise, surprise, Larry was not asked to do the cover. For reasons. The reasons are very specious and very, very odd, because they basically boil down to, that's not really the style we like anymore. It's not. We want a new, peppy, cool Gen Z style. And, Larry's old, and that's an old style. Larry Elmore is a effing legend, and the reason he's a effing legend is because he's Larry Elmore. And if Larry Elmore wants to do the cover of your book, you let Larry Elmore do the cover of your book. So they went a different direction.
Well, he
We're going to go in a different direction.
He blows my
Eric,
mind.
do you have the different direction? Because the different direction.
I'm trying to find
if you see
it.
This online, it is to Dragonlance covers what the new Snow White is to cinema. Abject failure on every level.
Okay,
the punchline. The punchline is
right.
not going to be anything we say. Larry's tweet covered it all. We need to show the original art from the last edition, and then we need to show what Wizards went with. Really and truly.
Give a picture of the companion, one of the original ones.
Oh my God!
I have a picture, but it is a side by side.
Throw it up. This is spectacular. I've seen self-owns before, but this is perhaps one of the greatest self-owns of all time.
All right.
And Larry was wanting to do the covers.
Because he does. Okay, so the left, that's the classic Larry Elmore. And to the right, I don't know what
the problem is you can't actually see the detail of the Dragons of Eternity cover because Eric doesn't have a high resolution picture. Let me find one for you.
Well, let's just say that
I got mine.
The closer you look, the worse it gets. It doesn't look terrible on this view. But the closer
look, you're far enough away from it that it doesn't look like the god-awful train wreck.
But compared to compared to the original.
Hold on, it's coming. 1 second.
What kind of a pose is that, by the way? I got my hand in my hip. I got my hand on my knee.
Hold on, I'm sending it to you because you're going to want to share this because this might be easily one of the ugliest things I think I've seen in a long damn time.
Yes, Fugly. What are those people doing on my deck?
All right, Eric, the picture's on its way.
I was sent this, and the comments I was sent, I can't repeat. I can't repeat the comments I was sent by friends.
Well, wait until you actually put the picture up, because when you zoom in on the picture, you know how every once in a while you're just compelled to go to a craft store and you buy a bag of 100 of those white googly-eyed eyeballs with adhesive, and then you go through your office and you put those googly eyes on people's pictures of their family and their loved ones and their spouse. And okay, maybe you've never done that, but I've done that more than once, which is always good for a laugh. But I want you to look at the picture that I sent Eric.
By the way, Gunn is right. There's a few years ago, lady tried to restore a cathedral art of.
Oh my God! Yes.
Can you zoom in? Okay, zoom in a little to the right.
Oh my God!
Keep going. Look at Tanis. No, go to your right. Your other
Oh,
right.
that was that too.
My other right.
What the hell?
Because
What
once you
What's
see
going
it,
on?
you can't unsee it.
He looks like he's on meth.
Is he wearing eye
He looks
makeup?
on meth. He looks like he's on meth. Look at that.
Oh my God! It
my
looks like he got
God.
goosed.
But my knee is awkwardly
Oh my
exposed.
God! It's awful. I mean, it's so horrific. I want to make that my profile
Is this
picture for a
now?
decade.
Do we know? Did a human do this, or was this AI art? Do we?
I
know?
am Tanis Half Elden, and I've been buggered by a dragon.
All right. It's been a while, but who the hell is
I
this supposed
believe
to
that's
be?
supposed to be Katara, but her
Oh
boobs
my
are going in one
God.
direction while her
No,
armor's going in the other.
That's
And-
not Katara.
And
Yeah,
then we've got like whatever the hell.
Gold Moon. That's not Gold Moon, is it?
And somebody dropped the head. It looks
What's
like
wrong
it's a
with her
digital-
head? Yes, her head.
Yes.
What's wrong with it?
Yes, the head is in a weird perspective. It
Right.
looks like this has been cobbled together out of different things.
It looks Photoshop. Yeah, they
It's like,
Photoshop.
I don't need no neck.
Neck? What
What
is
the
neck?
hell?
What
No
is that
need
look
neck.
on her face?
What is neck?
I don't know, but pull out some. Let's take
Okay,
a
look at the dragon.
The dragon's
Let's look
pretty
at the dragon. Okay, Larry does great dragons. So let's
good.
look
Yeah,
at
but
the-
why would you want a Larry dragon when you could have
that
whatever
looks like the
is?
dragon in the toy dragon, the blue dragon toy that they came out with a few years ago. I think the artist just
Jesus.
cribbed that off the box.
We can go back to Tanis. Let's zoom in on
Oh,
Tanis'
God,
face.
Tanis
This
is
should be
terrible.
our reaction picture. Yeah, her arms are off too. All the proportions on her are off.
Yeah, everything looks
Just
off.
zoom in on
God.
Tanis. Let's just go for the face again. Because this,
Wait. All right, I'm
Look
going
at
to
this.
strip the face. What's with the hands? These are hands that have never pulled a bow before. These are hands that
I think you're going too deep in the weeds on that. Just I like that
They're
his
cool.
calves
Those
are
hands are
larger
cool.
than his thighs. I like that his calves are twice
Well,
as big.
yeah.
as
Yeah,
his
look at
thighs.
that. Look at his face. He's waiting for his next meth hit. I'm telling you.
Oh
He's
my
got- his
God.
eyeballs are pinpricks.
Somebody at Wizards of the Coast thought this was the path to success.
See, here's the thing, Jim. I don't think they thought it was that they were just trying to prove a point, and they doubled down and went down with the ship. The point was we don't need Larry Elmore anymore or any of these old guys. But we're going to go all new. And I think that once they saw this, they were just like, okay, oh God, and they just had no choice but to go ahead with it. And probably, nobody's really going to notice how shitty this artwork is. And yes, it's been commented on by many, many people.
yes, Mr. Gunn, I got to give you credit for your comment. The CEO's daughter's intern needed a head start.
Oh God, that's God fucking awful. My God.
I mean, I've seen bad cover art. Like I'm absolutely invested. I'm invested in bad sci-fi covers. There's a great Reddit group that is nothing but bad sci-fi covers. And this is one of the all-time worst covers I've seen.
This reminds me of when I first started collecting comics. I got a bunch of Avengers, and they were Neil Adams when he did the Avengers run. And they were, oh my God, Neil Adams, one of the greatest artists in comic history. And I'm reading through this going, man, these are great. I want to get some older Avengers. So I went and bought some older Avengers, opened up. The artist for that issue was Don Heck. Now, if you know anything about comic art, Don Heck, bless his soul, was the hackiest of all hacky Marvel artists that ever lived. He was the guy you got when everybody else was busy and you had nobody else to draw. And his artwork was pretty terrible. And so I felt the same way when I opened the old like Avengers 39, and I'm sitting there staring at Don. I went from Neil Adams in issue 91 to Don Heck in 39, going, well, I guess I won't be collecting any old Avengers because I am not collecting a run of Don Heck. And that's what I feel like looking at this. We got Don Heck, guys. We got Don Heck.
God, that is awful. I mean, it's the fact that when you look now I got this image, which is the image Random House wanted associated with their book. I got this image from the Amazon page. So there's not a question of maybe this didn't scan correctly or whatever. No. Somebody at
Right.
Random House made the decision that this is the image they wanted to best represent the book. And if I was Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss, I'd be tearing Random House a new asshole.
Well,
Unbelievable.
sad truth is, Jim, most artists don't have control. I remember R.A. Salvatore would vociferously complain about the artists that did the covers of his Driss books because the dark elf on the cover looked nothing like Driss.
Yes.
And until finally he made enough money and got rich enough to where he could start saying, no, I want to choose the cover artist. And that's what, so unfortunately, a lot of these writers don't really get to choose who does their covers. But my God, they have an in with Larry Elmore.
Well, and the other part of this is, Michael Whalen talks about this all the time. Michael Whalen talks about how a few years ago, a decade ago, publishing industry just decided, screw artists, we can just put things in weird typefaces and strange colors, and that's enough of an image to sell a book. And the only people who have the clout to say, whoa, are people like Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah.
And that's terribly unfortunate. But hopefully someday some sanity will set in and we'll see these idiots, these 25, 26-year-old editors forbidden from doing this anymore.
I can only imagine, like you said, I can only imagine how angry Margaret and Tracy are and just having to sit there and stew because you're not going to come out and rip this. You want to sell your book.
No, I don't mind ripping it. I think it should be.
You have to look at it and go, we could have had Elmore. They wouldn't let us have Elmore.
Now, don't get me wrong. I love Larry. Larry only has a few different models of women that Larry draws, but nobody gives a shit because it's Larry fucking Elmore.
Yeah.
And you know what? Like, Larry Elmore is at the twilight of his career. Just let the fucking man paint Dragonlance if that's what he wants to fucking do. And I got nothing. I think this is just
bad. That's
silly.
That's just garbage. That's
It's hot garbage. Go
again,
back to Dennis. I like the fact that his eyes seem to follow you no matter where you are standing in the room.
It's eerie, isn't it?
It is eerie. Look at that. Zoom in. Look at it.
Is he undead? Is he supposed to be undead in this book? Maybe he dies in the book.
Wait. Are you ready? That needs a meme caption. Tanis.
Maybe he's a vampire in the book. We're not giving the artist credit. Maybe he's undead in the book.
This is a meme. This could be every time you masturbate, God kills a kitten and Tanis is watching.
Oh.
Maybe in the book, Tanis gets hooked on meth, and this is a very accurate portrayal.
Maybe AI can do a better version of this. How about that?
I don't know if it could be worse. It could.
How can it be worse?
Are we 100% sure this isn't AI? I mean,
I counted the fingers; they're all correct. But other than that, well, actually, I don't know because when she's holding her sword, that's an AI doesn't do very well with things like that.
I'm holding my sword. Yeah.
No, you're not. You just you got your pommel. You're not really, whatever.
I got your pommel right here, buddy.
I got your pommel right here, yo.
Pommel this.
Pommel that.
Wow.
Uh-oh.
Every time you look at it, it's like more badness hits you. Like you didn't notice something that's really terrible. And then you see, oh, yeah, I forgot about, yeah, that's terrible too. Oh, wait, that's terrible too. I mean, is that supposed to be, that's not really, is that Kit? If that's Kit, that's awful. That's awful. Kit does not look like that. Sorry. Katara does not look like that. That's just terrible.
It's unbelievably bad. Hold on 1 second, Eric. I'll send you something here. You can.
I'm just giving you a little palate cleanser for the moment.
Hold on 1 second. I'm coming. I'm coming to the rescue, buddy. Hold on. I might have to do a whole series of posts. I think I've got a new meme template and it's going to work. So let's see if this has legs. I'll let you decide. There you go. I've sent it to you. You can try it out. Eric, you tell me what you think.
Oh my God. All right, hold on. I'm just going to download it. Oh,
we're going to swap it out. We're going to swap this image out with something I just created with my magical digital arts
What's wrong with that? The girl in the middle, what's wrong with her head and her shoulders?
I know.
Well, first of all, her head's at the wrong angle for where her neck should be.
Yeah.
Anyway,
All right. Hold on.
Somebody had
There
to
we
okay. Somebody had to okay this, Jim. That's the worst part.
I know, and the worst part is somebody in New York didn't give a shit.
No,
They
just
didn't
said,
give a shit.
Yeah,
They said it looks
dragging
great.
a bunch of guys with swords. Yeah, looks good. Okay,
We'll
next.
fill the top 35% with typeface. It's got a dragon, so they know it has something to do with dragons. And then I need these characters. You're welcome. I might have to do a whole series of these. We'll see. Anyway, so why don't we talk? Let's change the subject. Let's move past Tannis, half elven, bug-eyed.
It's hard, but I'm going to be having take that down. I'm going to have nightmares already. Thank God. Oh,
that was different.
I need a palate cleanser.
That was horrible.
We're going to talk a little bit of Eric's done a couple videos this week. We're going to talk a little bit of Mike Morales because Mike's been in the news because he very publicly left or was fired, let go, whatever you call it. Watson.
He was laid off.
Laid off with quotation marks from Watson. As they cleared house of anybody that had any creative chops at all was laid off from Watson. And he went on to work. He's working for Chaosium. He's got his own game coming out. And I think his NDA must have expired because he is having some really hot opinions about gaming and his work on 5e and how he likes games. And Eric, Jim and I are going to let you talk about this because you are the one who posted the videos. Why don't you give us the background of this and what you said in your videos, and then Jim and I can comment on that.
Well, like you said, Mike, Mike Morales has been very vocal, and I understand. Listen, he's working on a new game. I understand he play tested it at GaryCon. And from those that have posted about being a part of his playtest, there was very positive response to it. But he is suddenly saying things on X/Twitter. I still have a problem calling Twitter X, but whatever. That without risk, there is no reward. There has to be conflict. He's talking all the things that old school gamers have been talking about since the late 70s or early 80s, whenever they started playing, which 5e has done a very good job of pushing to the side. And no, Mr. Potter, I am not going to go into a big diatribe of what I consider to be Care Bear D&D. You can, I'm not going to, just saying, you can figure that one out. If it takes 3 failures or 3 successes before your character lives or dies, the threat of death is certainly not in 5e as it is in prior editions. But Mike has, and this for his background, remember, he's the one that hired the pundit and I believe Joe Block, Zach Smith as consultants on 5e. And I know people in my videos answered, he used to run OD&D at Wizards of the Coast. That's great. But when he was running 5e, he was very much about how, even more so, I got somebody sent me plenty of his text message, his X messages about how to further remove death from 5e or the risks of death. And now he seems to have made a complete 180, which I'm happy to see, but I don't know if he's making a 180 because this is Mike how he sees it, or if this is Mike how he sees the success of Shadow Dark and DCC and is pivoting toward old school gaming because he thinks that's where an independent creator with money is going to be. I don't know, but I'm certainly delving into it on my videos. So that's a little background there, Mike.
Well, so Eric, so you posted a couple of videos on this, and my opinion is so everything I've heard about Mike is he's an old school guy. He likes old school D&D. He plays old school D&D. He happens to work for a company though where he helped create 4E and helped create 5E, which are 4E is very, very far from what we would consider original D&D. But to his, to his defense, he was given the order to make it like Worlds of Warcraft. And so
I'm
You
sorry,
could
do you
say
mean
no.
fifth
You could
edition
say
or
no.
fourth edition?
Fourth edition.
Yeah, fourth edition. Yeah, fourth edition. You could say no, I don't want to do that, and you're probably going to get fired or taken off the project. So what you do is you say, okay, they told me I had to make a World of Warcraft. I'm going to try to make it that way, but retain a little bit of, my dignity and not make it just ridiculous. We're going to do it. And 5e by any measure was much more successful. The best-selling version of D&D ever, more books sold than ever. And he was, his instructions along the lines of make this a game that people want to play, that and make sure there's nothing in the game that pushes them away. And for beginning characters or beginning players that aren't familiar with what we do, death of your character and having to re-roll a new character they don't like it. They don't like to do that. It's much more nowadays. Look at Critical Role. Look at the way things are rolling. It's about storytelling. It's about storytelling. And Mike made a game
Mike,
where it's difficult to die.
But there's also an additional aspect to it. Is that, and I learned this by playing a 6th level monk at ShireCon a few years ago, is that my 6th level character had 8 pages of shit in fairly small print from a printout of what their abilities and capabilities and everything they had. 8 sheets. So if that's your character at 6th level, yeah, you don't want to recreate it because that's a hell of a lot of work and a hell of a lot of investment.
Right.
And I think that's where the disconnect starts to happen.
And by any means, it's been successful because people, it turns out, they want to do storytelling D&D. They don't like their characters to die. At least 5e players. Now, the reason old schoolers like us get annoyed is because it's just not the kind of D&D we grew up with. There's no risk for the reward. And I think what Eric is upset about, if I'm right, Eric, is that he's saying something different. He's saying, "Oh, yeah, no. There should always be risk. You should be able to die and this and that." But that's not the game he created. That's not the game he supported for 8 years.
I hard stop this, right? And here's what I think. Like Chubby Funster says, the ultimate issue with Mike Merrills is, do you accept the apology of someone who sold out their beliefs to keep their job? That's what he did. It's not a mystery. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to sort of call horseshit. And I think there's a lot of ego in this discussion, and I'll tell you, the way I read the room, the way I read this business is that, Mike is a very public face of a company that a lot of people don't like for various reasons. We have discussed this ad nauseum on this show. But Mike is a guy who has spent 20 odd years in the RPG industry, not an easy feat. Mike has had success over the last 20 odd years in the RPG industry. And if you're going to be angry at Mike for doing his job, 4th edition, 5th edition, whatever, I say to you, like, it's real easy to carpet Mike, but Mike has a string of success that is enviable. We knock 5th edition for being Dungeons and Dragons with Nerf bumpers or pool noodles or whatever you want to call it. But Jesus Christ, it's run for 10 years is the stuff of RPG legend. Even in its heyday, TSR's BECMI did not have a 10-year run. 2nd edition did not have a 10-year run that sold the way that 5th edition has. Mm-hmm. And then Mr. Gunn says, I'm not too hard on folks who sell out. Folks got to eat. Now, that being said, those who can easily get another job are more suspect. Well, time out. I'm sorry, but the whole point of having a career, when you're in your 20s or early 30s and you start a career, right? You get out of university and you take a shitty job and you realize that's not what you want to do and you take a different job. I've known Mike for a number of years. I do not consider myself to be one of Mike's best friends. I have his number in my phone and I try not to bother the man, right? Because the man doesn't need me bothering him. The last time I talked to him on the phone was the day he got laid off at WotC. And all I said was, "Do you need anything? Is there anything I can do?" And he said, "No." And then I try not to bother people. But Mike has done something that, frankly, none of us, none of the three of us, and nobody in the chat has accomplished, which is he published adventure after adventure. He built his resume, his credentials. He was handed a project at WotC, 4th edition. Like it or not, it was what they wanted to publish at the time, and he did the job he was supposed to do, and it sold. But then, and I think this is really the genius of 5th edition, it was Mike that really heralded all the data collection to make 5th edition what, and this pains people, right? The people who hate 5th edition. 5th edition, everything about 5th edition came out of the single largest data gathering to make the edition of the game what the people involved in the playtesting, what they wanted. And this notion that he sold out, well, that's horseshit. That's just horseshit, right? I would say to you, okay, when you have 15 years in the RPG industry and have sold enough stuff to actually warrant being put in charge of one of the premier flagship properties in the RPG industry, and I ain't talking about like space opera. When you've got the stones and the credit and the ability to be given a project like 4th edition, let's not even talk about 5th edition, but let's talk about 4th edition. I think this notion that we can castigate him or call him out for being a sellout and so on and so forth, again, like we're creating drama where no drama exists. You know, Mike has endured the slings and arrows of people who felt he should have been fired years ago. He has endured, frankly, crusty old grognards sitting around going, well, let me open up another 2-liter of Mountain Dew and deliver my diatribe to you because I got things to say. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit because I'm not emotionally tied to a rule set to the point where I'm going to get bent that the guy who got put in the project managed to deliver it on time the way they wanted. It sold, and it sold well enough, right? 4th edition sold well enough to begat 5th edition. And the work he did on 4th edition is what got Mike the captain. I mean, he was Captain Stubing of the Love Boat, right? He's the one that was like, we're going to Puerto Vallarta and we're going to have a great time and wait till you see our special guests. And he got special guests. Yes, he got one that the howling banshee mob did not like and wanted to make sure that guy's name was never associated again, Zach. But what are we supposed to be upset by? And that's a question, Eric, like, I hear you talking, but I'm not sure I understand what it is I'm supposed to be aggrieved by. I'm not sure I understand why it is that I need to be hammer and tongs, pitchforks, and torches over somebody whose career is pretty fucking solid. You know, he had options of going somewhere else. I don't think he entertained the notion of going to Paizo, even though they were local for him. But you know what? Okay, he's tweeting about game philosophy that is at direct odds with 5e. 5e was what he was told to create.
So that's the point. When Eric and I were arguing, we were talking about this earlier, is that when you're given anybody that's had a project, and you have a project head, the head gives you, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. If you're given this, you don't go and say, well, I don't like that, we're going to do this. They're going to stare at you like you have 3 heads, because that's not the assignment you were given. Now, if it's something absolutely ridiculous, okay, we're gonna change everybody in D&D. Everybody's an inch tall, and it's going to be and now every D&D adventure is going to take place, and you're going to be giant. Everything's going to be giant. Okay, yeah, you're going to say, are you on drugs? And what are you talking about? I'm not doing that. But if the strictures you're given are that make a game that people want to play and like to play. And look, if the old guys want to buy it, fine. If they don't, that's fine too, because we're not a giant part of their philosophy anymore. The guys here, everybody here, most people in the chat, we're just not there. They don't. I'm not saying they don't care about us. We don't matter. We don't matter in that direction.
And I don't think it's about not mattering. Stop. I didn't miss the point. My point is pretty simple. Here's the deal. He was given a job. He was told to do the job, and he did the job. This is like painters. This is like Doug Kovacs. Doug Kovacs' style for Magic the Gathering cards, and Doug Kovacs' style for Dungeons and Dragons work, and Doug Kovacs' style for Dungeons Crawl Classics are three wildly different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All of them are uniquely Doug Kovacs in the art that he does. But he was told to do this and he was told to do this. And so this question about game philosophy, Chubby Funster says Mike Merrills is now tweeting about game philosophy that is at direct odds with 5e. Okay, all the people who hated 5e should be happy to see this. And if you're in love with 5e, perhaps this will spark just a little bit of a thought that, hey, wait a minute, that maybe there's something more beyond 5e. Like, I don't see what's bad here. And it's not that we don't have credit. There's no credit, so you can't say shit. My point is that I don't go to the doctor's office and play Google Doctor and know how to diagnose myself. I don't go to a lawyer and so on and so forth. And almost all of us in this chat, in this, we've dabbled, but we haven't put food on the table in a career for 20 odd years as a game designer like Merrills and any number of other people, Steve Winter, Matt Finch, blah, blah, blah. Make the list as long as you want. And my point to that is there's a certain time as a creative, as a writer, as an artist, whoever, you get your direction, but then you are the one who has to go do it. I'm friends with Matt Forbeck. I've known Matt Forbeck for 32 years. And at no point have I ever said to Matt Forbeck, hey, Matt, you ought to rewrite that Marvel Superheroes game. Or, hey, Matt, I really wish you would go back and revisit Deathwing because I think you really fucked that up for Space Hulk. Like I just don't.
So let's say I want to get my house painted tomorrow, and I hire a guy. I say, look, this is going to seem a little weird, but I want polka dots. And I'm going to pay you to do green polka dots on my house. And the guy looks at it and says, that's all right. I don't think it's going to work, and I don't think it's a good choice. And honestly, it's going to look stupid. But you know what? You're paying me to draw green polka dots on your house. I'm going to do green polka dots. I don't want to argue with the guy. I don't want the guy argue with you for 2 hours, telling me you can't do green polka dots. I just want green polka dots. Mike was in the same situation. Look, he was said, look, here's the kind of game we want. We want this. And he, look, to his credit, he made a game that, I can pick up, which I couldn't do with Paizo stuff, which I couldn't do with 3E, and I can convert it on the fly. It's that easy to convert. If you leave out advantage, disadvantage, you take a few things here, skip a thing here. I mean, you can play it with earlier editions. It's not impossible. Whereas you could not do that, I don't think.
You could do that with D20.
Man, I could not. I could not do that on the fly. I've tried, and I could not do it on the fly. I couldn't do it. But so it's not like he made an impenetrable game, a game that's so absolutely foreign to anything we believe in that we could never see it. But yes, the fact that you couldn't die was a problem with all.
It isn't the world of Cinnabar.
But I mean, yeah, I understand that the fact that you couldn't die, it sucked because I had many arguments with 5e players about how you couldn't die. Oh, you could die. Like, how? I've seen people try to die. You can't
come on, right? Like, and Jesus, Merrills, somebody says Jim would be 100%. Chubby Funster, Jim would be 100% correct if the people playing 5e weren't shitting on OSR guys as racist, sexist, hateful grognards. That is a minority of people. The argument, the tables of teenagers that I used to see on every Saturday at the Century Box have no idea how to spell grognard. They just don't know. And the majority of people who play 5th edition to this day are not the people that hate on the OSR movement. And again, OSR movement.
I see a lot of crossover, Jim.
That's right. Thicken your skin, right? Because if you're letting them get in your headspace and live rent-free in your head because you think somebody out there I mean, the simplest thing to do is don't be exactly the list. What is it? Don't be a racist, sexist, hate-filled grognard, which are exactly the people who are taking the piss out of Kelsey Dion and Shadow Dark right now, right? If you want an example of who those people are, those are the people who are picking on Shadow Dark because, God help them, Shadow Dark's at $1,700,000. And I mean, let me catch back up here. It's not that you can't criticize because you're not in the industry. My point is this is a guy who has a career. This is a guy who has a career of success after success after success. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to link Mike Merrill's personal opinions with WotC, which is a company. And like the example that comes to me that sticks out in my head is I was working at Gaines Workshop in 1994 when we expanded on the Eldar aspect wares and we brought out warp spiders. And Jesus, everybody wanted to know if we were going to have a warp spider Phoenix Lord. And I honestly would say, I don't know. I'm sure at some point we will. And I would go to show after show, store after store. People would ask me, and I would say, I don't know. Did I like that answer? No, I did not. Did I have a better answer? No, I did not. Do you know how long it fucking took Gaines Workshop to bring out Warp Spider Phoenix Lords? The Warp Spider Phoenix Lord dropped a month and a half ago.
Oh, dear.
31 years later.
That's ridiculous.
And I got news for you. Like, I didn't have any control over this. And if you had asked me after I left Gaines Workshop, what did you think of that? I would have said the same thing then in 2001 as I do now. That's horseshit. I don't believe you should make people wait for that model for that long. I think that's horseshit. But I was a guy whose job was not to dictate when the Phoenix Lord for the Warp Spiders came out. I just had to live the pain. Mm-hmm. And the trend says I used to create crappy hamburgers because that's what my boss said to me. I wouldn't eat that trash.
I've been there. But
I made it anyway.
I've been there.
And come on, right? Like, Chaosium has hired Merrills, and he's going to be in charge of RuneQuest, and he's going to get to do interesting things with RuneQuest. My RuneQuest interest is too small to be measured. I've never played it. I've never ever even looked at it seriously. But over the weekend, I got for free a RuneQuest starter box set. So at some point in the next, I don't know, week or two, I'll crack that bad boy open one night. I'll pour a Coke and I'll thumb my way through it and look through it the same way I did the Ring World box set when it came out, the Elric of Melniabone box set when it came out, all this stuff. Does it mean I'm going to drop everything and start playing RuneQuest? No. When Mike publishes the new version of RuneQuest that he's had his hands on, will I jump into that? I don't know. But I think we don't want to be caught up looking for drama where, frankly, I don't see any. If Mike had come out and said, 5th edition, all I want is 5th edition, that's it. If you don't understand 5th edition, fuck you. That's not Mike. He's not. He's only one of the nicest people face to face. And in this god-awful social media-driven world we live in, he's had slings, arrows, trebuchets, howitzers, naval emplacement batteries, you name it. He's had it all thrown at him. But in the end, he's a guy at a convention who will run a fun game. He's a guy that comes up with some clever things. I said at the start of the show there were some mechanics for what he had thrown into his game on Friday that I haven't seen before in a game. And I like that. I think that's interesting. But the notion that somebody this is like the old joke about when you get married, right? When you get married, men get married thinking my wife's never going to change. She's going to stay this smoldering hot woman that's going to want to bang the crap out of me. And women get married, well, he's a bit of a fixer-upper and I can get him there eventually. And the horrible thing is, the horrible truth, the reality of things is that after a woman has a couple of kids, things aren't the way they used to be and things grow older. And I got news for you. The older you get, the heavier you get. And dudes, we are notoriously resistant to change. Mm-hmm. If there's one thing we are set in our ways.
We are not a fixer-upper.
Mm-hmm. We're not a fixer-upper. We're a teardown, and we've always been a teardown. But I mean, really and truly, I don't understand the necessity. I don't understand the necessity of, there's no gotcha moment here. There's no aha moment. We haven't pulled the curtain aside to see Mike Merrill's at the controls of the Wizard of Oz. Mike's a guy with a family, and Mike's a guy who got laid off. Okay, he didn't get fired, right? He didn't get fired for a lack of job performance. He was somebody somewhere in the calculus at Hasbro/Watsy said, "We're paying him X. He delivered this, but we're making room for somebody else. We wish you all the best." And when you hear Mike talk about this, every step, because Mike could have ridden the elevator down, but he didn't. He took the stairway down, and the stairway gets out at the lobby. And as he came out of the stairway, put his stuff in a box and walked out, and he goes down the stairs and he comes out in the lobby. The bunch of the suits from Hasbro were in the lobby, and somebody said, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Every step I took down the stairs, I felt better. Every step towards the door, he felt better." And when he got to the door, he's like, and the woman asked him, "Are you okay?" He's like, "I'm great." And he was gone. And so this notion that anything he talks about, I mean, really and truly, this is a man free of shackles. This is a man free of NDA and the inability to talk.
Let me talk about something real quick, Jim. So I would just ask you, and I'll ask you, Eric, or you can answer this, and because you've been kind of the one, that's brought this up. What would he need to do to redeem himself in your eyes, to where you're like, okay, he gets it now. I am on board with Mike Morris. What would he have to do, Eric, in your eyes, to do that?
Honestly, for me, there's one thing that I'd love to know. I don't know if he can even speak about it publicly. Is if we got a full explanation as to why the names were removed from the beginning of the basic set book, whatever it was, when he removed the pundit and Zach and all those things came out. I'd like to hear the story behind that, because then I'd have more of an understanding of where he's at now. If the story is, whatever, or if it was, hey, I brought these guys on, they meant a lot, that taking it off kind of told me that maybe the direction the company was going in was not the company I wanted. To me, that's where the insight's going to be. That's the moment that most likely is where Mike decided. I mean, I have quotes from Mike telling that fans were using complexity in gaming as gatekeeping to keep women out, and I was like, 5e is the most.
Okay, so time out. How long ago was that quote?
Oh, that was from 2018.
So that would be 7 years ago.
Oh yeah, listen.
Right. So I guess we're saying. Okay, I guess what you're saying is, and I guess everybody here is saying too, is you would like to see some mea culpas from him, like have him come out and say, "Look, I said some things 7 years ago that I didn't. Maybe I don't necessarily believe then, and now I definitely don't."
If you believe it then, that's fine. It's like,
well, that's what I'm saying.
What got you to where you are now? I am a scarred individual who's 57 years old, and I've been misled and lied to most of my life. Right? We all have. We don't freely and easily trust. So when somebody does a 180 in their philosophies, you'd like to know why. And I'd like to see Mike talk about why. That's all.
I mean, I don't think that's not unreasonable. And look, he wants to talk about it. Maybe he has a really good explanation. He says, "Look, here's the deal. Either I couldn't, or I didn't, or I believe differently." Now, look, people change too. Maybe he's changed in 7 years.
And again, I would say, why does he have to answer to us? Why does he have to answer to anybody?
Oh, he absolutely doesn't. But I mean,
and come on, right? Like, do we all have the same exact opinions we had 7 or 8 years ago? Because I don't. I think I love all of the people in this channel and in this group of us talking. And I would say that sometimes we just have to be, okay, so Ty just said Merrill's needs to credibly explain why he was previously a Class A douchebag and credibly explain why. Why does he have to explain this to you, Ty? Why does
He doesn't have to explain it. I mean,
That's right.
This is his future, customers.
I'd like to hear it. I'd like to talk to him because I think it would be.
And how was he a Class A douchebag? By what standard?
I don't see that.
I'm sorry. What?
I don't think it's unreasonable to talk to him and say, look, you did say some stuff that was very annoying back then. Look, maybe he has a perfectly good explanation. He might say, look, whatever reason, and here's the reason. But you're right. You're right. I would like to have that conversation with him. I'd love to have that conversation with him where he explains, here's why I did what I did, and here's why I said that the game is so complex to keep women out of it, which I think is bullshit. I think that was that's a bullshit. That's a bullshit comment on Mike's part. Absolute bullshit. And I don't know why he felt like he had to say that that day. What if he thought?
Was he talking about 5th edition? Was he talking about?
No, he wasn't talking about 5th edition. That I don't. He was, I guess, talking about older editions were complex to keep women out of gaming. Because otherwise, guys, you're all fired from D&D.
I'm sorry. I need some context, and I'm going to need to see the quote.
Yeah, you get. I saw the quote. Eric could send to you, but and no matter how you slice it, it's cringy because it comes off as those old school gamers are a bunch of misogynists, women, He-Man women hater clubs, which I've never. By the way, I never experienced myself or saw when we had a woman play back in 1980. We had a girl in our group. So I mean, I never saw that, but if people experience it, I understand. But I don't know why Mike had to put himself out like that because I think that's cringy.
Again, I don't think. I think this is muckraking. I'm sorry, but I think this is not. I don't think this is really that big of an issue. And Eric, I see what Ty says. Ty's like, please try to keep up. What would he need to? Again,
I can't even get the damn thing to upload on the screen. So
look.
But why does he have to be taken seriously? Why is it he has to do something to satisfy the 6 or 8 or 20 or 150 people? Right? Like that's the thing that gets me. I really, again,
I would like to ask him the question, and look, if he wanted to reply that's a personal whatever I don't want to talk about, that's one thing. But I've talked to Mike before, and I think he would tell you. I think here's why I said that, and you know what? I think if he was wrong, he'd say he was wrong. I think he'd say, you know what, I was wrong, and I believe differently now because I've talked to him, and he's never seemed to be so full of ego, unlike some creators in our hobby that I know that would never backtrack or say that I ever did anything wrong. And because those are people that have done that are like that. They won't say that they've ever done anything wrong and everything they did was the greatest, blah blah. I don't think he's that kind of person. Is from what I've talked about. I think he would say
again, without seeing the full context and everything else, Eric. And I know you're trying to pull it up or whatever.
I think
it just doesn't really matter, right? I just don't think it really matters. And it's not that it's inappropriate to criticize someone for content.
There we go. Finally.
Funny how many of the same fans, yes, who insist on gatekeeping via rules, complexity, and lore density also have a problem with women in gaming top. You know what? I don't disagree with that because we know the peckerheads in our hobby. We've had them at our tables. We know who some of those people are who come up with ways to essentially attack this as a problem. Versus...
But I don't think. But here's I guess what Mike said. I had the problem with it. It's not just was a problem with keeping women out of gaming. The people that do that, they just gatekeep to keep the norms out of gaming. It's not just women. So Mike made it all about women. And it doesn't have to be women. It's just about normie, period.
But to me, it's a weird comment because 5e is the most complicated game that needs D&D Beyond to successfully run it. So if you don't have the computer helping you with the game, it's a pretty complex game to run. 4e was much less complex. 5e went into if you run it with all not basic, the basic book that came out.
Let me throw something out here. I had a very great I had a great example I can't talk about publicly that was pointed out to me last week by one of the people that we're talking about, right? I had a great example that was pointed out. Mike, I shared it with you. And I shared it with you. I shared it with you and Eric. And I'm not allowed to talk about it publicly. But somebody who is one of these people I mentioned at the top of the show, which was somebody carping about Kelsey Dion's success, has done something that, again, like, okay, you can do these things. You can do these things. But at the end of the day, you're still stuck with being who you are, right? And these people are the bane of our hobby in some ways. They're not the overt racists. They're not the overt sexists. You know, they're not the worst stereotypical grognards. These are. Sorry, go ahead.
There's an aspect to our hobby, and absolutely, there's an aspect to our hobby, and I've run into these guys too, where it's almost like it's a hazing. You know, they want to haze you. And this used to happen a lot. This used to happen a lot back in the 70s when war gamers were first getting into role-playing games. And there was a lot of quote-unquote hazing going on where people who didn't like the war gamers treated them like a certain way. The war gamers didn't like the RPG guys. And we've had these conflicts all through the history of our hobby where they basically make things hard because they want to see if you can handle how tough it's going to be. I guess my problem is I don't see that having to do particularly with women. I think it has to do particularly with just new people into the hobby and or normies coming in. Because look, there's a lot of people in our circle that don't like the fact that D&D's become mainstream. They don't like that. They liked it when it was a niche hobby that very few people play. This is the same people and Jim knows these people too, that throw fits that somebody pays $5,000 for an old D&D module. You should take that off the wall and draw in it with crayons and use it at the table. Damn it. If that's what it was made for, it's not made to be a $5,000 thing. So, those are the same people that don't understand how things change. And yet they just want to make things harder for everybody.
Well, and I think it's interesting because I'm seeing a lot of comments I'm not going to read out loud, but clearly say more about the people saying them than they do the person there. I mean, Mike's a guy who open tables. I'm not his best friend, but frankly, some of what I'm seeing just tells me a lot more about the people saying it than it does Mike. You know, when your vision of the world is so incredibly narrow and so siloed, again, this is a guy who had a job and you don't like what he did. Okay. Nobody's making you buy his products. And this notion that he has to pass some sort of litmus test as a game designer to make you happy enough to buy his product. This is why I go to a library. I borrow a lot of books from the library to read before I ever spend money to own a copy. I just checked out Sea of Rust and Zero Day. The author has a third book that's coming, and really and truly, I'm interested to sort of catch up. But I'm not going to buy them on Amazon. I'm going to check them out of the library and read them. And I think it's interesting because some of the stuff that I'm seeing about Merrill's, these sort of assumptions of guilt and so on and so forth. Some of the labeling, I just think that's
look, maybe as time goes on and we see more. Look, we've only had Mike Merle's sans WotC for a very short period of time. Maybe the longer we see him sans WotC, we'll get more of what he is actually about without the strictures of WotC telling him you have to say and do and act like this. So maybe this is just something that's going to come around organically the longer he's out in the wild, so to speak.
Yeah, and come on, like he's listen, it was a long time after I left Games Workshop before I wanted to get involved with Warhammer or Warhammer 40,000. It was a long time, right? You got some time to detox. You got some time to get out of the culture, and you got to get time out. You got some time under your belt just to sort of say, I'm out and I'm free. I mean, everybody's had a job where they threw too much of themselves into the job and put too much of themselves into a job and so on and so forth. And again, Mike was a guy who survived cut after cut after cut after cut after cut, and then finally didn't. And that's that's got scars with it as well, right? We've all heard about the Christmas massacres at WotC, where they would lay off all these people just before Christmas. Okay, pretty shitty thing to do, but that wasn't Mike making the decisions of doing these wholehearted swaths. It's unfortunate. It's like really,
and you're going to sit there. Look, I'm kind of straddling this because I can see both sides here, but the problem is you can't parse out. It's hard to parse out what was Mike 7 years ago and what was WotC 7 years ago.
Well, it wasn't 7 years ago when all of the people, because of, there was the campaign to have Mike fired for whatever the transgressions were.
And that was absolutely shitty because it was bullshit. That was a bullshit move by people.
But there were people as genuine then trying to get him fired from WotC as a lot of the comments that I'm reading in this chat, except that these are coming from a different slant. But there were people who were desperately organizing an effort, and these were people on the left. I think it would be safe to say, who were absolutely determined that this man should never be allowed to work again unless he was pumping gas.
Because he hired Zach in the pundit, and then because there was something to do. He said something degrading to a woman, but it really wasn't. It was something very innocuous that they just absolutely exploded and blew out of proportion. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the quote. But yes, he was nailed for those two things, and he was damned to hell, and there was nothing he could do or apologize or change that was going to change people. And there's still people to this day. I'm still on forums sometimes, and somebody says Mike Merles, and they're like, that SOB believer, he should have been fired when he got Zach to do the introduction to this.
Okay. And there's the point. The trend just nailed it, because we just had the exchange that sums it up right there. Chubby Funster, if I spent 20 years selling Pepsi and then I say that I liked Coke the whole time, people have a right to question whether or not my view. No, you had a job. Why does your job have to affect your personal preferences, right? If you told me that I could make $500,000 a year by telling people or by selling Pepsi, I'd be selling Pepsi. But I ain't never given up my Coke.
I would actually be more accepted if Mike did say I did it to keep my job, because it's probably the truth.
That's right.
It's probably the truth. And look, whether or not we agree to it or not, it's probably the truth. He had to keep his job. He had to say things and do things.
That's right. But then let's look at the next thing that got said, right? Gaines Workshop is not a place most people want to or could handle working at. Bullshit. I can tell you how many applications we used to get. I can tell you, when you're the world's largest miniature company, you make the world's best miniatures and the games that go with them, they are knocking your door down. The retail stores, the home office, right? It's really easy to say that, but I can tell you that it's not the case. And then people are riled up. We are all wound up by the world. And then Zentron nails it. God, I hate the culture war poisons everything. And that's it. The culture war poisons everything.
But it sure makes a lively conversation here.
I guess.
I'm going to take a moment to thank TNB.
Yes, thank you so much.
$70 Canadian. That's got to be at least like I don't know, Jim. You were Canadian. How much is that?
$7, right? Isn't that? That's at least $18 American.
No,
I'm just kidding.
Very, very generous. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. That is really nice. And Eric appreciates it.
And here's a funny one. Mike's a panderer, plain and simple. That was his job. Now WotC's unpopular, so he's changing his opinion.
I love chaos.
Well, and again, right? Like,
look. By the way, we are gonna try to get Mike on the tab. We would like to have Mike on
Just so that Ty can rant at him. It'll be
just so
it'll be epic.
Ty and Greg
Ty can just foam at the mouth and
Ty and Greg can just give him a hammer lock. Maybe he answers your questions. You don't know. He might think that's a
he'll laugh.
Legit question.
I think he'll laugh. I for as little as I've been around the guy, he strikes me as an incredibly well-adjusted, decent guy. And this notion that we should not like him because his views are liberal or quote unquote he's a douchebag. How do you even take that seriously? Right? My litmus test for game designers isn't their political proclivities and their I got nothing. I think
somebody it's human nature. Somebody says something that you don't like or that denigrates your tribe.
Tribe.
I can understand. I get bent out of shape by stuff every day. I do, by stuff that say, well, every fill in the blank is this, and I'm always like, dear God, no. Every fill in the blank is not this. Well, we're just, this is just a, an overview of that. No, that's not fair to say. All grognards hate women, or
that's right.
Whatever. I mean, yes, no, that is absolutely not fair to say because it's not true. And like I said, every time you say something like that, there's somebody with experiences that speak otherwise. I mean, look, our favorite pinup girl of all time, Kelsey, she learned D&D at the foot of James Mishler, who is grognardiest of all grognards. So, you can't be absolute on anything. And I've known people that say stupid things that end up regretting they said those stupid things. I would be interested to know if Mike regretted some of the things he said. Maybe he does. Like I said, that's what I'm saying. I'd like to ask him. Do you regret saying this? What were you thinking when you said this? And it could be because I've done this a million times. I was having a bad day. I just, I misspoke and then I felt like I didn't want to go back on it and I just let it sit there. I've done that. I have absolutely done that in my life. I've sent, to this day, when I write an email, I let it sit overnight. If it's going to be something that's going to be a hand grenade. Because I have sent many an email that I regretted the next morning when I woke up.
Dude, I sit it overnight and then I run it by Rachel.
I don't send it. Now I put it I put it aside and I wait and I wake up next morning. I'm usually like, delete. Because it's not something I really and look, if more people did that on social media would be a far better place because I see people stepping on their dick every day in social media. I'm like, I'm going to take a screenshot of that just to give you a hard time in 5 years because I don't think you're going to believe you said that 5 years from now. Screenshot.
Oh, come on, right? Like if you are friends with me on Facebook, you know how little I post. And part of it is because I'll write a draft and then I just let it sit. And then I think to myself, is this really worth the energy? And 99 times out of 100, it is not.
Sometimes you just like to write it out, right? It makes you feel better just writing it out. And then you write out 3 paragraphs of absolute bile. And then you let it sit and you look back on it. Yeah, okay, that's cool. Delete. I'm glad I got that out of my brain, but I really don't want to send that to that person.
And come on, how healthy is this? Right? Eric and I have never talked about this. This is a great time to do this.
Oh.
So Eric, a long time ago, about a subject, before Eric ever got to know me, made some comments.
I know where this is going. Holy shit, yes.
Let's do this.
So Eric made a number of comments about me at one point that were not correct.
They were as inaccurate as possible.
Have we ever spoken about this, Eric? We have not.
We actually have never spoken about this.
Here we go.
So let me just let me keep it up at the 50,000. Let me take it into orbit.
Oh, gee, all right.
So Eric said a number of things about me that were incorrect. They were fundamentally wrong. They were as wrong as they could be. Eric had heard some things from somebody else, and he repeated them. And I took a look at the situation, and I said, I don't need to say anything about this. Not really. I could have. Like I could have put on my best internet pithead and ranted and made some posts, or I could have called him in. I can't say that I was angry. I was disappointed more than anything else because Eric never reached out to me and said, well, I've heard this and this and this. And he did not. Because if he had, I could have said, here's this and this. Have at it. And my point in this is I'm not going to go back in time and pull this one thing out and hold it up and say Eric's a douchebag.
No, I was a bit of a douchebag, but it was because it was in my douchebag zone, not you. The topic in question was the douchebag zone, and you got pulled into it.
And I took a look at the situation and I thought, right, it's just it doesn't matter. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Because whatever Eric said was not right. It didn't I didn't have to change because I hadn't done anything wrong.
Nope.
And it just didn't make a difference. It didn't make a difference. And did it prevent me from doing this show when you first invited me on?
Yeah.
No. Did it prevent us from talking at North Texas the first year I went to North Texas? No. Because that's the first time I think I had ever been. No, I was around you at GaryCon.
No.
I think I was around you at GaryCon.
GaryCon.
But I was like, this is the guy who said this about me, and that was not true. And I had to like resolve that because you surround yourself with the people who you want to associate with. You surround yourself with the people that you think reflect on who you are. And I had this moment of, but you got to move on from this stuff, right? And I'm not going to fight the culture war from 7 years ago. I'm not going to fight, I don't see, the people who are like, well, Mike needs to do this and Mike needs to do that. And Mike's a douchebag. Again, that's on you. That's not on Mike. It's not on anybody else. And if you need to walk around and feel better for calling Mike a douchebag or Mike has to answer and so on and so forth. Why are we expending energy over comments from 7 years ago? Because frankly, we're all past it. Most of us are past it. Most of us really are. So.
Mike,
I can't hear Mike.
My son's, I was saying, when I first met Bill Meinhardt, I said some unkind things about him that I apologized 4 years later. So
whatever.
He still gives me hell over
Mike or Susan.
No, but the Bill, because when I first got on the this is like 20 years ago, first got on the AKM, he was the guy that owned everything, and I said something like, What kind of a dick bag likes to brag about all the stuff they own or something? I went on and on a few cookie comments, and then I don't know that I met, then I talked to him online a year later. I said, "Oh, you're the guy that I just lit up in the ASIM a few years ago," and I said, "I'd like to apologize for that because I realize what he's about. Bill is about preserving our hobby in a way that nobody else here really understands. And so once I understood that, I was like, okay, I understand why he has one of everything in the universe because he's preserving the hobby. But
he's down to like 100 items.
Yeah. But at the time I was like, man, what small penis energy this guy has. And so I did apologize to him because I realized I was being a little harsh. So it can happen, but that was 20 years ago. It's a different guy, different person. I used to send emails without letting them.
I'm not going to defend him if they try to kill the OGL people. You know what? If they do that, they deserve the torches and pitchforks. And they tried that once, and how did that go? The pushback was legendary.
Oh God,
legendary.
Yeah. Could have even hurt the movie sales.
And shit, I'm not looking for personal growth from our chat members. I know better. Be who you are, right? But
let's just end this, and we're all going to agree on something to make everybody happy. Disney should really stop the live action movies because Snow White is an absolute fucking travesty. I have read the reviews, and we have a winner for perhaps worst Disney movie of all time. If the reviews maybe
Okay, but Mike, what in these reviews? Which part of the reviews? And I've seen a number of reviews. There's one consistent part that is surprisingly positive. Surprisingly,
I'll tell you what it is. I bet I know what it is. Zegler's singing voice.
Yes,
because even the people that hate the movie says she's a good singer. She
should go on to being a pop singer.
That's my thing is just go into forget the acting stuff. Let's just go into pop singing. Forget about the acting. You're not really that good at it, but let's just do some pop singing and you're probably okay. But no, Gal Gadot got absolutely hammered. The sets look terrible. The CGI is awful. The plot line's confusing. They say everything looks cheap and just it's just on and on and on. It's one of the few things in this war-torn world of ours that everybody seems to agree with and relish the thought of just going after Disney, because let's face it, Disney doesn't have a lot of fans right now anyway, and it's fun to see them spend $250 million on a movie that's only made back, I think, about $50 million. So
God, I saw that the box office receipts had it somewhere like 75 million or 85 million or
it's got to make like what, 700 million to even break even.
And somebody compared it to a bomb from last year that I can't remember. But that Snow White cost another $100 million beyond what the other bomb had been.
They had to reshoot.
They had a monstrous amount of reshoots.
They had to reshoot, and then they had to you got to add your promotion budget. And you got this and that. It was an absolute. It's been in the can for what, 2 years. It's an absolute disaster. So we can all agree that's got everybody rubbing their hands together in glee as they write their own little 1-star or 2-star. By the way, lowest review in IMDb history for a Disney movie.
Couldn't happen to nicer people.
Listen, but Mike, that was never a surprise. Just like actually Project Sigil burning and the launch being like essentially launched and canceled. Nobody's really surprised that Snow White's having this problem either.
The Wall Street Journal had a great rundown on how much of a train wreck this was and how long it had come. It started when the moment in time that it all started was when the actress playing Snow White, she did a tweet about the movie, and then she did a tweet about and Palestine should be free or what. And then that.
And by the way, her co-star is Gal Gadot, who served in the Israeli army. So that's always a good one. Yeah,
so Disney then Disney convinced her that they needed somebody. They needed a monitor to make sure that whatever she tweeted about met protocol, and then she ignored that and she dropped another bomb, and so on and so forth. But yes, one of the points of the article was it doesn't matter where you are on the right or the left or the center, everybody hates this movie. And the funniest thing I saw was somebody said, if you've got to work on a big project, why don't you buy a ticket to Snow White and then you can be in an empty room by yourself so you can get all your work done. And if you just wear noise canceling headphones and not look at the screen, you're going to be set.
And go to one of those theaters that has some nice reclining chairs too. Order some food while you're there, and then just work on your project.
And nobody else in there with
you. You could turn the light on your phone. Nobody's there. So
the other thing I enjoyed on the internet was that people were putting screen captures of their local theater showings of Snow White on the first weekend, where not a single ticket had been sold in the matinee, all the primetime kids showings. Because really and truly, right? Like the old Hollywood model used to be that whatever you did as a studio is you kept the stars away from the press. And the modern day example of somebody who has followed this to a huge career success over the last however many years since an incident is Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise will do openings for the Mission Impossible movies. He'll do some press junkets, but they're tightly controlled. And ever since his jumping on the couch business on the Oprah Winfrey Show, he has got an agent who has just lashed him down and refuses to let him get caught out about Scientology, get caught out about whatever. And really and truly, right? Like they've just kept him, they keep him in a box and they only open him and bring him out when there's some publicity to be done for the new movie. And like it or loathe it, this is the old studio model. And when you have this day and age where you have a star, the lead star in the movie, who has the ability to disrupt the viability of the movie through personal actions. Somebody who had said, "Who am I to criticize?" Listen, she did what she wanted to do, and she continued to do it after Disney made it clear, hey, before you send out another tweet or say something, we want to vet it. Again, she was taking the paycheck. Disney has hard and fast rules for the people under contract.
Yeah, he's the case of somebody that takes the payment but doesn't do it.
That's right, and I don't think she'll be. If she's in another Disney movie, I'll be surprised.
Shut up, look pretty, smile, and just say you love the original. Don't say the original sucked. Prince Charming sucks. I mean, and go. By the way, go Hamas, and no. She went. This is what happens when you don't go by the. There's a really interesting piece. Somebody says, I wonder if Disney, I know they're stabbing at me. I wonder if Disney's been making these mistakes for more than 7 years now. Disney's been making these mistakes for a lot longer than 7 years. Let's talk about John Carter, right? We wouldn't dare call it John Carter of Mars or Princess of Mars or whatever. John Carter was so badly marketed. It was a great movie. It was a very good movie. It was terribly marketed,
and the new regime inherited the movie, and it was awful. It was awful.
I have a story, a really quick Disney story, just to show you how they just continue to step on their dicks too. So the new Daredevil season 4 came out after 7 years. Netflix did the first 3 seasons. My wife and I are in the middle of watching it. It is absolutely fantastic.
Oh, really? Okay.
If you have not seen the Netflix, it is absolutely fantastic. The dialogue,
the Netflix was great.
The plot line, every part. It's just great. And so now the Disney version, which is the 4th season, has come out. And I found out this today. I'm reading an interview. The first draft they wrote, John Berthnall, who plays the Punisher, did not. He said he's not even going to be in it. He goes, I'm not going to play that part. The actors who played Wilson, Charlie Cox, who played Daredevil, and Vincent D'Onofrio played William Fisk, did not want to do it. It was that bad. They asked for the original writer for the Netflix series and the original director to come in. That's the only way those 3 actors would come back and do it. That's how bad Disney had their treatment of it. They said it was like humorous. So if you watch the 3 Netflix seasons, there's not a lot of it is hardcore. It is pedal to the metal. It's gothic. It's dark. They wanted to do an uplifting, happy, silly version. It was ridiculous. And the actors just said, we're not going to come back. Give us the original writer. And so the original writer came back. The original director came back. And that's the only reason they did the 4th season. That's shows you how out of touch Disney is and how they don't, their own products that they bought, they have no clue how to market or what to do with them. And thank goodness Cox and Bernthal and D'Onofrio stood up and said, we're not going to do this. This is just garbage.
Somebody asked if I would come to Zegler's defense if she did 180 on her positions. I don't think it's a case of, Ziegler believes what she posted and come on, right? Like, I'm another person on the internet. Why am I going to pick a fight? Like let her go. And if Ziegler had done a 180, right? I think this is a key difference. If Ziegler had done a 180 before the movie came out, if she had done a 180 after the original comment about Palestine and then whatever it is she tweeted in addition or said in addition, I think it would have been just as damaging as the original comments, because the people who supported her position would have been angry at her, and the people who
a
disagreed with her
ruse.
with her first statements would have said, well, now Disney's twisted your arm and made you say this other. Like, I think she was in a no-win. Like, after the initial comment, there was a chance, but this was a doomed production from.
She's 20. She's in her early 20s. She's a
That's
child.
right.
She made stupid comments because she's young and ridiculous. And look, I'm not going to say I didn't love to see. I love to see Disney. Let's don't put it wrong. I love to see Disney taking on the nuts because they've ruined Star Wars. They had the golden goose with Marvel, and then the last 5 years, I don't know what the hell they're doing with Marvel. It makes no sense.
Talk about. I mean, Star Wars and Marvel are case studies for how
to the hottest properties that you couldn't screw up. You can't screw them up, and they screwed them up. And now they're ruining the Disney name with doing the fairy tale stuff. So it's on one hand it's infuriating, on the other hand it's hilarious to watch them just screw up again and again and again. I'm going to hold out a hope for the Fantastic Four is going to bring them back to form. I don't know, maybe not, but I'm going to hold a hope that they're going to maybe turn it around with Phase 27 or whatever this phase is, and
yeah, I think the problem is there are so many moments that we can think about as far as that we can think about Marvel, right? I always think about the Avengers. I always think about how the Avengers, the first 30 or 40 issues of the Avengers, really laid out what the success story was. That you could have this sort of cast of characters that changed from here to there, but there were some key moments, like the Kree Skrull War, the Mandoroids or whatever, the
Mandroids,
like there's all sorts of stuff that you could have included, and they just never did, and that's okay, right? Sure, I guess you can do that. But they've decided to take it. The Eternals was the first one that really stunk. And you had a chance to bring all of that Kirby artwork. You had a chance to bring all of that stuff to life in a way that would have been visually an unbelievable feast, and try to tie this into the overall and it was, when you waste Selma Hayek in a movie, you've committed a venal sin, right? You've committed a truly venal sin. But I want to get to something we never talked about tonight, and as long as we're over, screw it. Which is Sigil. All the people being laid off from the D&D.
Well, actually, we talked about it last week, Jim. But yeah, we're.
I feel bad for these
last
people.
Week we knew it was faltering, and then I think that night or the next night they hit us with the 90% layoff. And that was like, wow. Holy shit! And
that's brutal, right? That's a really brutal thing to hear about. To like, I got laid off 3 days before Christmas once, and you don't have that happen without having some scars.
No.
And so anytime I see about these layoffs, right? And I'm a guy who got laid off last year. You don't like it. You can accept it for what it is. You can accept that it happened. It doesn't mean you like it, but life goes on. But I genuinely feel bad, and truthfully, think about the smoking residue of what's left over. Does this portend a sea change of some kind? I don't know. I've been very much on record as saying that Fifth E hit a height that it couldn't sustain, and what comes after that is going to be down, and the rest of the market is going to go up because people are looking for alternatives. And that's pretty much playing out. Like, we have some pretty great Kickstarters right now that are going to be wrapping up over the next couple of weeks with millions of dollars, thousands of backers. And I think that's a sign of how healthy the ecosystem is outside of WotC. WotC still has the biggest intellectual property in role-playing games.
By far.
So no matter what they do, they're going to have success of some kind. I don't think they'll have 5e success, because frankly, it burned too hard for too long and too brightly, and everybody needs a break. But the break are going to be in things like Shadow Dark, and that's why Shadow Dark's at 1.7 million the last time.
Oh, I haven't even checked recently. But
Well, have a look.
Here's the thing about Project Sigil, which tells you, in my opinion, WotC doesn't understand their customer base. When you play D&D or any RPG, you're playing with your friends, right? Usually the common place is your table, and the reason why we use VTTs is because we can play with people from across the world that are our friends. But those virtual tables have a very easy buy-in. They're cross-platform. I can run it on a Linux machine. I can run it on my iPad. I can run something you can run on your phone. But WotC wanted to make this, what they released in the end was PC only, high-end PC at that, and the assumption that you'll form, I guess, new groups and leave your group members behind. Like, I wouldn't migrate to a new VTT if I had to leave behind one of my players. That was built-in failure for their new VTT, was the assumption that they would transition anybody who's using a VTT to a very limited platform that doesn't bring your whole group.
Right.
And they were nowhere close, I guess, to doing a Mac version or a Linux version, and those aren't going to ever come. So, I mean, they don't understand their players. They don't understand why people game. It isn't to make Baldur's Gate 3 into a D&D session. It's to socialize and enjoy your friends and enjoy that social interaction. And they just kind of lost. They put the cart before the horse, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I yes, all the above. And come on, right? This is one of the reasons why. When there are market leaders in an area, you can like or loathe Discord all you want, but Jesus, Discord is a pretty significant power player. Virtual tabletops, I don't use one. I've never used one, and I certainly don't know which one is the strongest of them. But there's one or two that are on top of everybody else, and why you would want to try to go into that mature space and try to carve out being a competitor for that when you can simply work with them as a partner, and it's collect royalties and move away, collect royalties with little work. I don't understand that. When you look at how much money Games Workshop makes in licensing,
right?
That's just free money pouring in. You still have control over the IP. You still have control over what gets published, what doesn't. There's a lot of stuff that has come out that frankly, 30 years ago, nobody envisioned, ever thought would be, right? If you had told me there would be these little phone app games and so on and so forth, nobody would believe that. But they're huge generators of cash for Games Workshop. And frankly, WotC/Hasbro could do the exact same thing. They could just collect all this, as the kids say, fat loot. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't understand it. And so frankly, somebody somewhere took a look at somebody at Hasbro's management took a hard look at this and decided that it was time for the mercy killing. And however many people lost their jobs, I'm sorry, that really sucks. I don't know. I just don't know how you can feel gleeful about these people losing their jobs. I'm not. Yeah. I didn't think that the product was going to be something that was ever going to succeed in the marketplace. And Mike and Eric,
the jobs these people had, the jobs in that industry are. I know lots of people work in that industry. They're, you don't know. They're getting laid off. They're getting fired. Right. I know people worked on some of the most, like Skyrim, some of the most successful projects ever. They eventually get laid off. Everybody in that industry eventually gets booted. It just happens. And unless you're lucky enough to have a really long project, like I know someone works in the Elder Scrolls Online now. I guess it's been 10 years now, and counting. And so, yeah, they're lucky, but they'll get laid off too someday. Someday that'll come to an end. Fallout Online 76 will come to an end.
Everything
Warcraft will come to an end at some point. God knows when that'll be, but that'll happen.
Well, and eventually the subscribers base, in the Halo sphere, people talk about what could revive Halo, and how 343 Industries, the Microsoft in-house company that handles Halo, Bungie's having difficulty, and Bungie got bought out by Sony. And there's people who are like, why can't Microsoft just buy Bungie back and give Halo back to Bungie? And there's any number of reasons why those hoops can't be jumped through. But all of this stuff has a life cycle, right? And eventually these things come to an end. I'm the world's biggest fan of Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri. I still have Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri on my computer. But, I don't expect at any point since 2003 that there would ever be another expansion, and that's okay. I still play it every once in a while. I can have my nostalgia and so on and so forth. So,
yeah.
I got nothing.
No, well, this is a good, folks.
But yeah. By the way, if you want to see something, if we've talked about if anybody in here we're talking about Snow White and said, I don't really know what these guys talk about, go on YouTube, pull up the Critical Drinker. Critical Drinker, who's hilarious, and watch his videos. He has 4 or 5 videos last week, and you'll get the gist of why we're having an absolute laugh riot on Disney's.
He takes the hits so you don't have to, folks.
Yeah, absolutely. He watches them so we don't have to.
Hold on a second. Agile. Somebody's gifting memberships. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Why is everybody being so nice to us tonight?
I don't know.
That's because I made him angry.
There you go. Get him angry.
I made him angry,
Tim.
By the way, next week a movie will come out. Working Man, Jason Statham, based on a book by Chuck Dixon, one of my favorite comic book writers of all time. He wrote The Punisher, created Bane, wrote Batman. Looks good. It looks good if you like. It falls in my wife's category of movies she likes. A hot dude beating the shit out of bad guys. So I guess we'll be seeing Working Man next week. So I'll let everybody know what happens with that.
It was Agile Monk.
There's nobody that appreciates me. And my point isn't that Meryl can't be wrong, because Meryl's wrong. We're all wrong about stuff, right? But I just think the ad hominem attacks, this constant, there's entitlement, and sometimes it comes through really clear. I don't care if you disagree with Meryl's. I don't care if you hate his game design of 4th edition and 5th edition, but I think there's also, you have to be able to distance yourself from something like this, and you also have to understand that people have jobs. This is I still bought Dungeons and Dragons products while I was working for Games Workshop. I still bought FASA products. I bought a lot of stuff while I was working for Games Workshop because even though I lived and breathed Games Workshop for the better part of a decade, it didn't stop me from liking other stuff. And just because I sold Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000 products, I'm sorry, I should do it like Hank Hill. Just because I can't do it. Wait a minute. Just because I sold Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000 products doesn't mean, Bobby, that I can't indulge in some fantasy role playing, and that doesn't just mean with your mother. So there you go.
All right. Well, that was classic. Folks, you might see these same 3 faces plus Glenn tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. It's our afternoon live, probably about an hour and 50. Be half as long as this show, okay? Just put that into perspective. So don't settle in with like a 2-hour lunch. You're only going to get about an hour out of us.
Those are actually fun. We do an hour. We come in. We crap all over everything, then we run out. Really, it's awesome.
We run out. Thursday night, the vlog of many things. Tomorrow night, Saturday is Friday's the random party. You can see Greg, who was stirring shit in the chat. You can see him on Twitter.
Hand grenades everywhere. Yes.
Yeah.
Come there and drop it and throw it right back at him.
So
I love BattleTech. I have ASD 7 Atlas, baby, all the way.
thank you to the generosity of those of you in the chat and the chat, and thank you to Jim for stirring people up and getting those swallows.
Somebody has to get them to respond.
He's the auctioneer. He knows how to get those wallets open. That he got those wallets open today. So thank you. All right, folks. Be safe, be well. God bless. You know the whole spiel. I'm tired and I'm an old man and I got a bladder.
Oh dear, the bladder's gone. I always